The crystal chandeliers at the Waldorf Astoria glittered like frozen stars suspended in gold. Waiters in crisp white jackets drifted through the ballroom with practiced grace, balancing trays of flutes filled with Veuve Clicquot. Laughter echoed off marble walls. Every face in the room, polished purposeful, belonged to someone who mattered, or at least someone who thought they did. I was standing near the edge of the crowd, half shielded by a floral arrangement taller than me, one hand wrapped loosely around a half-finished glass of champagne. I hadn't planned to come. I rarely did. These events were Harper's world, my sister's stage, her audience, her mirror. And then I heard it, the clink of a dessert spoon against a crystal glass. Conversation stilled like someone hit mute on a $1,000 speaker. Harper's voice rang out, honeyed and sure, floating across the room like a broadcast signal. Thank you all for being here tonight. What a year it's been. The applause was automatic. Someone from HR who wore bow ties actually whistled. Harper stood center stage, framed by the company logo, her black dress tailored so precisely it could have been sewn into her skin. Every gesture, every smile perfectly measured. It was the same voice she used when she convinced Dad to step down early. The same smile she gave me when she borrowed my tuition fund for her first and only startup. And now she continued lifting her glass, the moment you've all been waiting for. I didn't know what that moment was supposed to be. A product launch, a partnership, some shiny new data set. But I knew it wasn't supposed to involve me. Please join me in congratulating our new Vice President of Finance, my brilliant sister, Claire Richardson. The air shifted. I felt it before I saw it, 300 heads turning toward me in unison. A spotlight found my face like it had been tracking me all night. My stomach dropped so fast I almost spilled my drink. What I didn't interview? I wasn't notified. I hadn't even seen an updated org chart. My mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. All I could do was blink as Harper extended one arm toward me, smiling like this had all been lovingly planned. Come on up here, Claire! Applause broke out. Confetti cannons didn't fire, but they might as well have. My feet moved, my body obeyed. Years of quiet compliance had conditioned me to smile and stand still, to not embarrass the family, to let Harper shine. Halfway to the stage, my clutch buzzed in my hand. I didn't look at it immediately. But something in me, a flicker of instinct, told me to check. I slid my thumb across the screen. Bank alert. Withdrawal confirmed. $138,000 transferred to account ending in 4891. My fingers froze. My steps did not. I was still walking, still smiling faintly, still hearing the echoes of my own name being applauded, like it belonged to someone successful, someone proud. But inside something hollowed out. That money, my money, was everything. My house down payment, my savings from 10 years of refusing vacations, late nights spent reconciling numbers that weren't mine, declining dinners, saying no again and again. Gone. Just like that. I reached the edge of the stage. Harper pulled me into a sisterly hug, the kind that looks warm from a distance and feels cold up close. Her lips barely moved as she whispered against my ear. Just smile, little sis. It's your big night. Her voice was light lilting, but I could feel the steel underneath. I stood next to her as cameras flashed. Behind every lens, I imagined the captions already forming Power Sisters. Legacy leadership, keeping it in the family. I knew better. For the next 30 minutes, I played the role. I nodded through congratulations from board members I'd only ever emailed. I shook hands. I answered shallow questions with polite phrases. I even laughed once, maybe twice. But I didn't feel any of it. At 9:17 p.m., I excused myself to the ladies' room and leaned against the marble sink, clutching the counter like it might keep me from floating away. I checked my account again. $42.80 left. A lifetime of savings drained without a single call. No verification. No apology. I stared into the mirror and saw a woman who didn't recognize the shape of her own face. Not anymore. And yet somehow my expression remained calm. No one had noticed. That was the thing about quiet women. They could be bleeding internally and no one would hear it over the music. As I stepped back into the ballroom, Harper was laughing at the head table with two investment directors. She didn't even glance my way, not once. But I saw her check her phone, and I saw her smile widen just slightly. That's when I knew. That wasn't just coincidence. It was design. This was never a celebration. It was a setup. She needed a face, a name on the filings, a fallback if the math stopped making sense. And quiet, loyal, diligent me was perfect for the role. The toast that changed everything wasn't a toast at all. It was a silent betrayal served cold in a champagne flute, and I had just swallowed it whole. It started long before the champagne, before the gala, before Harper's voice echoed through the ballroom like prophecy. It began in a town where the lawns were always trimmed, the shutters always painted, and ambition was stitched into the fabric of the family name. Greenwich, Connecticut, where even childhood felt curated. We were raised in a world of gleaming staircases and monogrammed linens. Our parents believed in appearances, not just keeping them, but perfecting them. At every fundraiser, every school gala, every Christmas card shoot, Harper was the front page. Blonde, bold, magnetic. The kind of girl adults lean toward at dinner parties, telling each other she's going to run the world someday. I was the younger one, quieter, a shadow cast by the spotlight she stood in so naturally. Where Harper glowed, I calculated. She won debate trophies and homecoming votes. I won math competitions that no one came to. Our mother hung both ribbons on the fridge, but only one of them ever made it into the family newsletter. It wasn't resentment. Not then. It was just the arrangement. The understood roles. Even at 17, Harper knew how to win a room. I still remember watching her deliver her valedictorian speech, her voice rising like a Broadway act. Cameras clicked. The superintendent shook her hand like she was already a CEO. She turned to me, on stage winked, and said later, "Next year's your turn, right?" But I never wanted the mic. I wanted order, structure. I liked spreadsheets before I had a reason to use them. I liked rules not to follow blindly, but to understand. So I studied. I got into Harvard Business School with a full scholarship. That letter-thick envelope crimson seal was the first thing I ever accomplished that my parents couldn't tie back to Harper. It was mine. Entirely. And I gave it up. Not because I wasn't proud. Not because I didn't want it. But because Harper came to me in the summer between undergrad and Boston. She was 25. Newly married, newly divorced 6 months later. And she had a pitch. A tech-backed investment firm, she'd said. Hyper-focused on emerging market access and ESG portfolios. Disruptive, sustainable, brilliant. Her words, not mine. She needed someone who could keep the numbers clean, the projections tight. She needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about the inconsistencies, the overpromised returns, the favor she'd called in to get this little tax thing fixed. She needed me. "I just need a year," she said. "We can build something big. And after that you can go to Harvard. It'll be even better real-world experience." So I stayed, moved back into my old room, worked 12-hour days for a firm that didn't yet exist on paper, built models, cleaned up cash flows, kept silent about the ledger inconsistencies that almost triggered an audit that fall. Harper always had an answer. I made sure the answers matched the numbers. And when she made her first $1 million off that company, flipping it to a bigger firm in San Francisco, she stood at the closing dinner, champagne in hand, and said I couldn't have done it without my sister. That line made it into the magazine feature. Not the part where I turned down Harvard. Not the part where I fixed her books. Just the part that looked good on camera. After that, I stayed in finance. Worked at 3 firms in 6 years. Nothing flashy, just steady, clean work. Harper went on to do flashier things. She joined boards, invested in 2 failed startups, dated a private equity partner, and eventually took over the family business, Richardson Global, when Dad stepped aside for a quieter life. But what no one knew, what I never said, was that Harper came to me again 3 years ago. This time it was messier. A client flagged a compliance issue. A series of transactions routed through a consulting firm in Belize, a firm that didn't actually exist. Harper was under review. Nothing public yet, but serious enough to bring in outside counsel. "I just need you to look at it," she said, sliding the flash drive across my kitchen table. "Tell me I'm not insane. Tell me I'm still clean." She wasn't. I traced the digital trail for 3 weeks in silence, scrubbing through QuickBooks backups and Google Drive folders labeled innocuously as wedding planning. I built a shield, a firewall between the real fraud and what could be proved. And then I fixed it. Quietly, discreetly. Enough to bury the review, reclassify the payments, and clean up the reporting just in time for their quarterly review. She never said thank you. But she did text me a week later. "You really are the smartest person I know. Don't ever forget it." And I didn't. I never forgot it. Just like I never forgot the subtle ways she always got the glory, and I got the burden. The family would beam about Harper's instinct, her business acumen, her leadership charisma. They never mentioned how someone still had to make the math add up. I'd gotten good at silence. Good at being the one behind the curtain holding the strings. It didn't hurt. Not at first. I didn't need the credit. I told myself that over and over again until I started to believe it. But something inside me changed that night at the Waldorf. Not just because of the money, though. $138,000 disappearing in an instant has a way of clarifying your priorities. No, it was the way Harper smiled when she saw me walking toward that stage. The way her eyes glittered like I was a chess piece finally moved into place. All those years of silence, of sacrifice, I realized they hadn't made me loyal. They had made me complicit. And now, I wasn't sure if I hated her more for using me, or if I hated myself more for letting her. By the time I slipped out of the ballroom and into the back hallway leading toward the hotel's business center, my hands had stopped shaking, but only just. The quiet hum of the corridor was a welcome contrast to the laughter and music still echoing behind me. For a moment, I could pretend I wasn't the newly appointed vice president of finance, who just lost her life savings in the same hour she was handed a title she never asked for. I sat down on a velvet-cushioned bench beneath an oil painting of sailboats, pulled out my phone and opened my banking app again. The numbers hadn't changed. $138,000 gone. A single line of text, cold and final wire transfer, completed Ironcrest Capital Holdings, LLC. I didn't recognize the name, and that in itself was a problem. I'd been in finance long enough to know the signs. The name was too polished, too generic, too clean, like a front door that had never been used. My fingers moved quickly across the screen. I searched corporate registries' business license databases. Ironcrest Capital had no real website, no LinkedIn page. The only digital footprint it left behind was a P.O. box in Delaware, a state where shell companies multiply like shadows. And just like that, the shape of the trap began to emerge. The timing, the promotion, the vanished money. Harper didn't just pull my name from a hat. She'd made me vice president of finance, not to reward me, but to bury me beneath her. I knew enough about corporate bylaws to understand what that meant. In the eyes of the law, a VP of finance isn't just a title. It's liability. It's accountability, especially in the U.S., where executives are expected to sign off on financials for up to a full fiscal year. 12 months of ledgers, 12 months of transactions. If anything went wrong, I would be the one with ink on my hands. My breath slowed, and I leaned back against the wall. For years, I had helped Harper clean up small fires. She always stopped short of anything that would explode. But this time, she hadn't just crossed a line. She'd made me the line. I started tracing back the transactions. Ironcrest had received 3 large wire transfers over the past 2 weeks, 2 from Richardson Global and 1, just hours ago, from my personal account. All routed through different intermediary banks camouflaged as strategic investment portfolios. Harper must have been running this structure for months, slowly pushing money through until it could disappear for good. I checked the timestamp on the transfer. 7:43 p.m. That was 15 minutes before she called my name on stage. That's when I knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was choreography. Every move, every word was part of a dance she'd rehearsed long before the music ever started. A text buzzed on my screen. Harper needs you near the stage. Press wants a few photos of the new VP. Big smiles. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. I was about to stand when a soft voice spoke beside me. Miss Richardson. I turned. A hotel server in a black vest and tie stood a few feet away, hands clasped in front of him like he wasn't sure how close he was allowed to get. "There's a phone call for you at the front desk," he said. "They said it's urgent." "Who is it?" They didn't say. But they asked for you by name. He led me through a staff hallway lined with trays of desserts and melting ice buckets. The hum of the ballroom faded into something more clinical. My heels clicked softly on tile. The front desk clerk nodded as I approached. "Right this way, Ms. Richardson." He gestured toward a private office tucked behind the reception counter. I stepped inside. 3 people stood waiting. 2 men in dark suits and a woman in a slate gray blazer with her hair pinned back like she had more important things to do after this. All 3 held badges. "Claire Richardson," the woman said gently. "I'm Special Agent Samantha Torres. This is Agent Bill Andrews and Agent Eng. We're with the FBI Financial Crimes Division." The room suddenly felt airless. I nodded but couldn't speak. "We're currently investigating a number of suspicious transactions related to Ironcrest Capital Holdings," she continued. "Your name appeared in a transfer tonight." I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it. It wasn't me. I mean, it came from my account, but I didn't authorize it." Torres studied me, not suspiciously, almost sympathetically. "Do you have access to the account right now?" I nodded again and opened my phone, showed her the alert. The account, the transaction history. Her eyes moved across the screen slowly, methodically, and then the words that changed everything. "Do you know who initiated this transfer?" My mouth opened before I could decide whether to answer. "My sister," I said. "Harper Richardson, CEO of Richardson Global." There was a long pause. Not silence. The air conditioner buzzed softly overhead, but the kind of pause that means something just clicked into place. Torres turned to her colleagues. Andrews scribbled something into a small notebook. Eng checked his phone. "You're not the first person to say her name," Torres said quietly. "But you may be the only one with access to her paper trail." I looked down at the glow of my screen. My name attached to thousands of dollars in transactions I didn't make. I thought about the board, the photographers, the toasts. I thought about how proud Harper had looked when she handed me the mic, like a magician passing the wand before the audience sees the wires. Claire Torres said gently, "Are you in a position to help us?" I took a slow breath. My life as I knew it was unraveling. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Maybe I needed it to unravel. "Yes," I said, meeting her eyes. "But I don't just want to help. I want to show you exactly how deep this goes." The door shut softly behind me, closing out the marble lobby and the distant sounds of clinking glasses. Inside the small hotel office, time slowed. The hum of a desktop monitor, the quiet rustle of a notepad turning, the weight of 3 federal agents watching my every move. Agent Samantha Torres sat across from me, her hands folded neatly on the table, sleeves rolled just above her wrists in that deliberate, unbothered way people wear when they carry authority without performance. Agent Bill Andrews stood to her right, reading through something on his tablet while Agent Eng remained silent, eyes scanning the room. I took a breath. Not for courage, I didn't have any left, just for clarity. "I've been watching this for a while," I said softly, pulling my laptop from my bag. 9 months, give or take. I didn't know what she was building at first, but I knew it wasn't clean. Torres tilted her head. "You've been tracking your sister," I nodded. "Not out of spite. At first it was just curiosity. Numbers weren't adding up. Expense reports shifted, vendor payments looping. Then came the shell entities. Same addresses, different names. I tapped the keyboard. The screen lit up. A neatly organized desktop appeared, each folder labeled by month, subfolders by transaction type. "I used to work in forensic accounting. Morgan Stanley," I added. as if that would somehow justify the obsessive trail of spreadsheets and metadata audits I was about to share. It did. Torres leaned forward. Here, I opened a file marked March Consulting Fees. This vendor Solace Group LLC billed our firm over $300,000 last quarter. But when I dug deeper, the EIN tied back to a landscaping company in Nevada that's been inactive since 2016. The payment records were rerouted through an offshore processor registered to a P.O. box in the Caymans. And then I showed her the cross-reference. Multiple companies, all receiving structured payments, all linked by IP addresses, geolocated to the same office suite in Midtown Manhattan. One of them, I explained, was registered to a woman named Elise Thorne. Agent Andrews looked up. Marcus Thorne's wife? I nodded. The room stilled again. A pause, not of confusion, but confirmation. This folder, I said, opening another, shows the timing of each transaction. Harper would move company funds into a shell entity. That entity would initiate an investment into Ironcrest or another umbrella LLC. From there, the funds would bounce through 2 or 3 off-books processors before landing in a private portfolio under a false name. Torres gave a slow exhale. You mapped the whole thing. I wasn't sure if I'd ever use it, I said quietly. But I kept going, just in case. That's the part I think surprised them the most, that I didn't come forward when it started. That I stayed, silent, complicit. But silence wasn't approval. It was survival. Torres looked at me for a long moment. You realize, she said finally, if we hadn't called tonight, your sister's plan might have worked. She made me VP for a reason, I replied. It was brilliant in a cruel way. Once the audit season hit, anything illegal would be my signature, my liability. And with my account drained, I wouldn't have been able to afford a lawyer who knew where to look. Andrews let out a soft whistle. That's cold. I looked down at my hands. They were still resting calmly on the keyboard. Maybe because the fear had been with me for so long, it no longer had room to grow. I thought I could keep her out of trouble, I whispered. For years, I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, cleaned up enough, I could protect her from herself. Torres didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a thin black device. She slid it across the table. A microphone, smaller than a paperclip. We need your help one more time, she said. We have enough to open the case, but we need to lock the final piece. I stared at it. You want me to go back? We don't believe she knows we're on to her, she said carefully. The party gives us a few more hours to gather what we need. Once she knows, she'll burn everything she hasn't already hidden. Tonight is our window. She'll notice, I murmured. She's already watching me. That's why we need someone who knows her patterns, Torres said. Someone who knows how she lies. I looked up, met her gaze. She doesn't lie. Not directly. No, she implies. She weaves. She wraps falsehood in silk. Torres nodded slowly. Then we need you to unravel her. Just enough. Just tonight. Outside the office door, I could hear faint music, the band striking up again. A jazz version of something that used to mean joy. Back in that ballroom, Harper was holding court, the queen of clean narrative. And I was the story she thought she could write. But not tonight. I picked up the microphone and clipped it to the inside of my dress just beneath the lapel. I felt the weight of it, not in grams, but in consequence. Torres stood. You won't be alone. We'll have agents positioned around the ballroom. You won't see us, but we'll be watching. Just act natural, Andrews added. I gave a quiet laugh. Natural for me is pretending nothing's wrong. Torres smiled. Then you're perfect for this. As I stepped out of that quiet room and back into the glittering lie we used to call a family business, I thought about all the times I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. Tonight, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't accuse. I would do something far more dangerous. I would let her keep talking. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that seemed far too delicate for the storm I was walking into. The music swelled as I stepped back into the ballroom, not triumphant, not dramatic, just steady, the kind of return that doesn't demand attention, but quietly bends the air around it. Everything looked the same. Glittering chandeliers, champagne glasses, held aloft conversations laced with corporate bravado. But something had shifted. Or maybe it was just me. The weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. Harper spotted me immediately. She moved toward me like a dancer who'd rehearsed the steps 100 times. Her smile, glossy, gracious, rehearsed, never faltered. "There you are," she whispered as she took my arm. "The board's getting antsy. You missed your cue." "I was just getting some air," I replied. "It's all so overwhelming." She beamed at me, all white teeth and perfect angles. "Don't be modest. This is your night." And she pulled me gently but firmly back toward the stage. The crowd parted like water. People clapped again, fewer this time, more confused than celebratory. I stepped up beside her. The lights were warmer now, the haze of the champagne glow starting to flicker out. Harper leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give the floor to our new Vice President of Finance, a woman of brilliance, integrity, and above all, loyalty." There was something about the way she said that last word. Drawn out, directed, coded in warning. I took the mic slowly. The microphone felt cold in my hand, small but heavier than it looked. For a moment, I just breathed. The room was silent. The kind of silence that vibrates like everyone's waiting for a speech that will say nothing but polish everything. I smiled, a small, deliberate thing, and began. "My sister taught me loyalty." The first words landed with gentle force. Harper turned slightly, her posture tightening almost imperceptibly. "She taught me that family sticks together, that we protect each other, that we show up. And for years I believed that meant silence, letting things go, cleaning up messes." I paused, looked down at the champagne glass someone had set beside the podium, watched a single bubble rise to the surface and disappear. "But I've learned something else, too." I looked back at the crowd. Some leaned in, some stiffened. "I've learned that loyalty without accountability isn't family. It's just enablement." There was a beat, a breath, and I've learned to keep records. Behind me, I heard a faint, unmistakable sound, the sharp clink of Harper's glass against the podium. Her hand missed its mark. Her control, for the first time in a decade, cracked like porcelain. In my earpiece, Torres's voice came through a whisper, as calm as snowfall warrants secured. "Keep her talking." I kept going. "In the past year, I've been looking at our numbers, quietly, carefully, and tonight I want to thank the board not just for the title, but for trusting me with something even more valuable." I turned toward them now, the men and women in suits who had once seen me as a footnote beneath Harper's paragraphs. Transparency, a cough, a rustle of papers. One of the board members glanced at his phone, his face blanching as news likely began to trickle in. Behind me, Harper moved closer. Her voice, low and urgent, cut across the air. "Claire, maybe save the deep dive for Monday. Tonight's for celebrating." I didn't look at her. "Oh, but this is worth celebrating," I said softly. "Especially the new portfolio allocations. Ironcrest Capital, for example, such an innovative structure." Now she touched my arm, not gently. Her nails dug in. A word. "Now." She pulled me off stage with a precision that masked the desperation beneath it. Her smile stayed in place just long enough to clear the spotlight. We slipped through a side door, down a hallway, lined with silent portraits of other magnates' men in oil paintings who'd likely orchestrated their own private collapses. She didn't speak until the door to her private office shut behind us, and then the mask dropped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I turned slowly, letting the quiet answer for me. Her office smelled of lavender and leather, the kind of curated power that said nothing out loud, but everything in scent. "I'm telling the truth," I said. Her laugh was bitter brittle. "You think this makes you noble? Do you have any idea what you're involved in?" "Yes," I said. "More than you know." She stepped closer, eyes wild. "You don't understand the players, the money, the stakes. You're an analyst, Claire. You were never meant to carry this." "No," I agreed. "I was meant to take the fall." She blinked. Just once. A flicker. And I knew then she hadn't thought I'd figure it out. Not this soon, not this cleanly. "You're my sister," she said. Softer now. "Everything I did to protect what we built." I looked at her, this woman who'd spent years calling her ambition protection, her manipulation love. "No," I said. "Everything you did to protect yourself." A knock at the door. Then it opened. Torres entered, followed by Andrews and Nya Harper Richardson. Torres said badge, held steady voice, unshaken. "We need you to come with us." Harper turned back to me, eyes wide with disbelief, not anger, not betrayal, confusion. She genuinely didn't understand how her quiet little sister had unraveled everything. She stepped forward, still pleading. "Claire, please, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I told them the truth I said." And they listened. As Torres read Harper her rights, I watched the weight of empire crumble in a room scented with lilacs and control. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt or sorrow. I felt stillness. And in that stillness, I understood something Harper never did. Power doesn't come from standing in the spotlight. It comes from knowing when to step out of the shadows and speak. The silence inside Harper's office was unnerving. Not peaceful, not empty, but thick with tension, like the air before a storm finally breaks. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It stalks. The moment the agent stepped out and the door clicked shut behind them, Harper turned to me like a predator forced into a corner. Gone was the smiling executive, the adored CEO. In her place stood the version of Harper I'd only ever glimpsed, the one who stopped pretending. Her heels clicked across the floor. Not rushed, calculated. So she began, voice low, trembling with the effort to sound composed. "This is how you repay me." I didn't answer. I was past that. She circled me slowly, like she was giving herself time to rewrite the script in real time. "I gave you everything," she continued. "That promotion, that wasn't charity. That was a gift. I was setting you up for something big." "No," I said quietly. "You were setting me up to take the fall." Harper's eyes narrowed. "You're paranoid. You always have been. You obsess over numbers, hide behind spreadsheets, and now you think you're some kind of martyr? Claire, come on." I met her gaze. "You drained my account. You routed money through my name. You put my signature on documents tied to a dozen shell companies and offshore accounts." My voice didn't rise, but the words landed with the kind of weight even she couldn't ignore. Her lip curled. "You were never supposed to see that." "I did," I said. "And I saved every trace." I moved to the desk, opened my laptop, and turned it toward her. One by one, I pulled up the evidence. Transaction records, IP logs, metadata trails, falsified invoices from companies that didn't exist before she created them on paper. Then I clicked open a folder labeled Cayman Cross Auths. You thought I'd never trace it. But I followed the IP. Every login, every approval. They all came from your corner office at HQ or that co-working space on Fifth Avenue. Same device fingerprint, same user session ID. She stared at the screen, but I knew she wasn't really reading. "Claire." Her voice softened, now switching tactics. "I know it looks bad, but it's more complicated than this. I wasn't stealing. I was protecting the company. Ironcrest wasn't just a front, it was a bridge fund. I was moving capital fast before the market shifted." I shook my head. "You were laundering money. Don't use words you don't understand." "I do understand," I said, sharper now. "I spent 3 years building forensic audits for firms that tried to hide behind the same language." She faltered. Then came the real twist of the knife. "You think the FBI cares about your little spreadsheets? They don't want me. I'm a headline, that's it. They're coming for bigger fish, and if you keep tying yourself to this, you'll get caught too. I can fix this, Claire, but not if you're against me." I looked at her, really looked. For years she'd worn that expression. Commanding, magnetic, always just one sentence away from convincing everyone that gravity itself bent to her favor, and for years it worked. But not anymore. "I'm not against you," I said quietly. "I'm just not beneath you anymore." For a moment, I thought she might cry. Her eyes glistened not with tears, but with rage too dense to fall. She stepped back, slamming her hand against the wall. "You're nothing without me," she snapped. "You never had vision, never had fire. You've spent your whole life following me cleaning up my messes, and now you think you're the hero." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thin black folder. I laid it gently on the desk. Inside were hard copies, bank records, flight manifests, business registrations. At the top, a wire transfer from Iron Crest to a numbered Swiss account. "This is who you are," I said, "and this is what you thought I'd never find." She didn't touch the file. Didn't need to. Her silence was enough. The illusion had shattered, and now all that remained was the truth. A knock on the door. Then it opened. Torres stepped inside, followed by Agent Ng and 2 uniformed officers. Harper Richardson. Torres said calmly, "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." Harper's head whipped toward me, eyes wide. "Claire," her voice cracked, desperate. "You're my sister." The words echoed through the office like a plea and a curse all at once. I felt them land. In some other version of our lives, maybe that line would have broken me. Maybe I would have let it, but not tonight. I took a breath, let the silence stretch, and then I said what I'd waited years to find the strength for. "That's why I had to be the one to stop you." Harper didn't speak again. The officers moved in, placed the cuffs around her wrists. The same hands that used to braid my hair before ballet recitals, the same hands that signed every falsified form she thought no one would check. She didn't resist, just stood there frozen in disbelief, as if the laws she bent weren't meant to touch her. They led her out slowly past the portraits, past the echoes of her own footsteps, and mine not far behind. The door closed behind her. The air inside the room shifted. It wasn't lighter, but it was clear. I turned back to Torres. She was already gathering the documents, speaking quietly into her earpiece. I heard her say, "Package secured. Target in custody." I stood for a long time in that office. The room still smelled faintly of Harper's perfumed jasmine and steel. I looked around at the empire she'd built and burned. Then I walked out, closing the door behind me, with one hand the folder still in the other. For the first time, I wasn't following in her footsteps. I was erasing them. The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of my apartment, casting long, golden lines across the hardwood floor. I hadn't slept. Not because I was haunted, but because for the first time in years I wasn't. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, gone cold hours ago, as the television in the corner flickered quietly, with headlines too surreal to fully absorb. Breaking Harper Richardson, CEO of Richardson Equity, arrested in federal financial fraud case. Her headshot stared back at me on every network, CNN, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal. That perfect corporate smile. That steel-cut jawline. Now framed with phrases like Ponzi scheme fraud conspiracy. Beneath it all, in smaller font key, evidence provided by sister and newly appointed interim CFO Claire Richardson. I turned the volume down. The anchors didn't understand what they were narrating. To them it was a scandal. To me it was an ending, and the start of something I hadn't yet named. At 8:43 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from the board's legal counsel. Emergency session. 9:30, sharp. Offer letter ready. I didn't need to ask which offer. I already knew. 30 minutes later, I walked through the front doors of Richardson Equity's headquarters, the same doors I used to enter, half hidden, behind Harper, avoiding eye contact with the front desk. Today, security stood a little straighter when they saw me. They opened the elevator doors before I reached them. On the top floor, the boardroom buzzed with soft chaos murmurs, rustling papers, tired faces. Everyone looked older today. Guilt does that. So does fear. Mr. Langston, the board chair, stood as I entered. "Ms. Richardson," he said, clearing his throat. "Thank you for coming. Please." He gestured to the seat at the head of the table, the one Harper had sat in for the past 7 years. "Have a seat." I did. He slid a folder toward me. The title read, Chief Financial Officer, Interim Appointment Package. The board has reviewed your cooperation with federal authorities, he began, and the systems you put in place to expose the fraud. Quite frankly, we should have seen it ourselves. We didn't. His pause was intentional, an acknowledgement, a tiny admission of collective failure. We'd like to appoint you as acting CFO effective immediately to stabilize the company through this crisis. I opened the folder, scanned the contents. The salary was generous, the authority clear, the expectations sky high. But I closed it before reaching the last page. I'll accept, I said, with one condition. Langston tilted his head. Yes, a full forensic audit, I said evenly. 5 years, independent firm, no one exempt. Silence fell like a curtain. That could be disruptive, someone muttered. Not as disruptive as a federal raid, I replied. What happened here wasn't one person's mistake. Harper didn't build this alone. She just knew no one was looking. Langston nodded slowly. We'll make it happen. And one more thing, I said, tapping the closed folder. When Harper took over, she convinced my father to forfeit his retirement package. Said it was best for optics, that he should step aside quietly. I want it reinstated, fully, with interest. Langston didn't even blink. Done. There was no applause, no handshakes, just a silence that meant understood. By noon, I was standing in front of my parents' house in Westport. It hadn't changed much. The white shutters still needed repainting, the flower bed slightly overgrown, but the air felt heavier now, like the truth had been living here, waiting patiently for me to finally open the door. My mother greeted me at the front, still in her robe, eyes tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Claire, she whispered, reaching to hug me. I let her. Dad sat at the kitchen table, hunched over the newspaper. He didn't look up when I entered. The journal lay open on the counter, Harper's face staring up at us like a ghost caught mid-sentence. He finally spoke. She says it's a misunderstanding. A trap. Says you. His voice cracked. You turned on her. I didn't turn. I said softly. I told the truth. Mom sat beside him. But she's your sister. I know. There was a long pause. The kind of silence that used to live between the walls of our home, full of the things we never said, the truths we swallowed whole for the sake of peace. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Instead, I reached into my bag and laid a thick manila envelope on the table. These are copies of the financial records, mortgage details, transfers, the accounts she used, the property she bought. There's a house in Zurich, 2 in the Caymans. None of it was an investment. She was leaving. She just hadn't told you yet. Dad finally looked at me. Really looked. His hands trembled as he reached for the folder like he already knew, but needed to see it in ink to believe. I'm not asking you to believe me over her, I said. I'm just asking you to look. Mom began to cry, not loud, not dramatic, just that quiet kind of sorrow that seeps into the bones. She said it was for the family, she whispered. I stood. I know. And then I added gently, but saying it doesn't make it true. I didn't stay long. There was nothing left to say. As I left the envelope still untouched on the kitchen table, I thought about how many times I'd begged for their attention, their clarity. Not to be chosen over Harper, just to be seen beside her. But I wasn't asking anymore. By sunset, I was back in my office, the CFO's office now. My name was already on the door. The view overlooked the city like it had always been mine to hold. I stood there for a while, watching the lights flicker on across Manhattan one by one. Not victory lights, just life. Ordinary, bright, undeniable. Redemption doesn't always feel like a parade. Sometimes it's just paperwork, truth on a page, and the sound of your own name finally spoken with respect. Not because you're related to power, but because you became it. The sun filtered in like forgiveness through the wide windows of my new apartment, a quiet place at the edge of the West Village, just far enough from the noise, but close enough to feel alive. The city stirred beneath me. Sirens in the distance, a jogger's rhythmic footfall on pavement, a barista clinking cups 2 floors down. Life going on, without headlines, without her. I sat on the windowsill, barefoot knees tucked to my chest, cradling a mug that had long gone cold. The apartment still smelled like paint and new wood, unfamiliar, yes, but clean, unwritten. There were no old photos here, no awards on the wall, no reminders of who I'd once had to be. Just me. And that was enough. My phone buzzed quietly against the table. A single message. No emojis, no fanfare. Torres. She was planning to leave the country next week. Zurich, you stopped it in time. I stared at the screen for a long while, thumb hovering over the keyboard, then turned it off. I didn't need a reply. Some things didn't require words anymore. I walked to the kitchen bare shelves, quiet hum of the fridge, and poured myself a glass of water. The kind of act that meant nothing to anyone else but for me now felt sacred. In this space, I didn't owe anyone silence, or safety, or the soft version of myself that kept peace in rooms that didn't deserve it. The world outside might still see Harper as a cautionary tale, a brilliant woman undone by greed. But that wasn't my story. My story wasn't about downfall. It was about a choice. A quiet revolution that started the moment I stopped asking for permission to be right. She used to call me the quiet one, the dependable one, the good sister. As if goodness was docility, as if silence was the same thing as loyalty. But I had learned something loud. You can't silence someone who keeps receipts. And you can't bury the truth when the truth has a name. The last words she said to me echoed sometimes in the quiet. You're my sister. A sentence that once held power, that once could have pulled me back into her shadow. But family, I'd come to realize, doesn't just mean shared blood. It means shared weight, shared values, shared accountability. She'd never shared those things. When I handed the final folders to the federal agents, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole, like every invisible line she'd drawn between us over the years had finally been erased, not with a scream, but with a signature. There were offers now, of course. Interviews, profiles, women who brought down giants some magazine had titled a pitch deck. CNBC had left 3 voicemails asking for an exclusive. But I didn't answer. Let them write whatever version they needed. I wasn't chasing the narrative anymore. The truth didn't need embellishment, it just needed to be spoken. And the truth was this: I had chosen to stay silent for too long. I had buried myself in spreadsheets and loyalty and family mythology. I had said it's okay when it wasn't. I had smiled through bruises I didn't let show. But not anymore. I walked back to my bedroom, sunlight now spilling full and unfiltered across the hardwood. The bed was unmade. My briefcase lay open on the floor, files half-organized, highlighters still uncapped. The chaos didn't bother me. It was the kind of mess that belonged to me. Honest, transparent, earned. On my dresser sat a small frame. Not of Harper. Not of my parents. Just a quote printed in simple black ink on cream cardstock. Clarity is the courage to stand alone in truth. I'd found it in a bookstore downtown last week. Bought it without thinking. Some part of me knew I needed the reminder. Not because I doubted myself anymore, but because I'd spent a lifetime being told that standing alone was failure. And now, I knew better. Standing alone had saved me. Later that evening, I'd meet with the audit team. We'd dig into 5 years of transactions. There would be red flags, pushback phone calls from shareholders and lawyers. But I wasn't afraid of the process. I welcomed it. Because cleaning house wasn't just about Harper. It was about the culture that let her thrive, the systems that stayed silent with her. Now they'd answer to someone who refused to look away. I looked around the apartment again, no ghosts here, no footsteps to follow. Just the sound of my own breath, the city beyond, and the soft unfolding of a life not borrowed from anyone else. Fade out. A quiet piano note plays. Voiceover. She called me the quiet one, but I learned something loud. You can't silence someone who keeps receipts. And you can't bury the truth when the truth has a name. A moment of stillness. Then I chose truth over loyalty. I chose justice over comfort, and for the first time, I chose me, fade to black. And this time no music swells, just silence. The good kind, the earned kind, the kind that only comes when you've finally spoken every word you were once too afraid to say.